All right, hi, AP Stats. I thought I'd go over a quick review of chapter 12 from our book of using linear regression on our calculator and running the tests and the confidence intervals for linear regression. So the first thing I did is I just made up data points for list 1 and list 2. There are 12 of them, so I'll leave this up on the screen. You'll want to pause this and enter this in if you want to follow along with the same numbers. So this is the first 7. And then I believe there are 12 of them. So 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. There would be our last one. So again, pause it, enter it if you want to follow along. All right, so first thing I want to do is I want to go take a look at those. So I'm going to press second stat plot, and I'm going to turn on plot 1 and have it just look at list 1 against list 2. And then I'm also going to make sure everything else is turned off. So I'm going to go to plot 2, and I'm going to turn that one off. And I'm also going to look into y equals and make sure there's nothing else there and only plot 1 is going. So then I'm going to press zoom 9, and I can see that there are my data points. They look generally linear, right? We look pretty good. Okay, so next thing I want to do is I want to run linear regression on these. I'm going to press stat, go over to calc, pick number 8, and I'm going to tell it list 1 and list 2, not going to worry about the rest, calculate. And typically this would be the numbers we would write down. R being 97% is a pretty good percentage of it being linear. So as long as the residual plot looks decent, this would be a really good linear regression type of problem. So I have all of this. By running this, remember, is how I get my residual file filled. And we're going to need that residual to plot the residual plot. And that was some of our condition checks, if you remember, was to look at the residual plot. So that's the next thing I want to do is I want to go look at the residual plot. So if I go and I look at the residual plot, I'm going to turn off the first one. And then I'm going to go up to the top and say plot 2. I'm going to turn that one on. And I'm going to make sure the x is the same and then the y is resid. And if you've forgotten, that is under second stat. And it should be at the very bottom. And remember, it gets refilled every time you run linear regression. So that's every time you run stat calculate 8. Okay, so again, I'm going to press zoom 9. And my residual plot looks pretty good. Random scatter pattern of residuals. So that looks pretty good. So remember that when we're doing linear regression, one of the other tests that we have to do for conditions is to make sure that the residual plot is approximately normal, or residuals are approximately normal. And we were talking before on how annoying this was to have to press trace and write down every residual and say this is a 7.7 and to regroup them. So I was playing around with the calculator of how we could do this as well. And so since it's saved under that word resid, I realized that I could go back to press the stat, press enter, go over to list 3, go to the top of list 3, and just say fill in my residuals right here. Remember, that's blue stat. I'm going to go down to resid, press enter, and it will fill in all of my residuals. So now I can look at those and I can see what my highest residual is, what my lowest residual is, just by arrowing through them all. And it looks like the largest residual amount is about 7, and the lowest is about -4, -5-ish, somewhere around there. And one of the things we had to do was to check to see if the residuals were approximately normal. So now that they're in list 3, I can actually make this another graph. So back up to stat plot. Choose the first one, or let's even go to the third one for a change. I'm going to go to the third one. I'm going to turn that one on. And this time I'm going to tell it to do a histogram. And the only thing I'm going to tell it to do a histogram is on list 3, or you could put in resids here as well. Okay, so I'm going to tell it to just do list 3. And then again, I want to go shut off all the other plots. So I'm going to press y equals and go and turn off plot 2, press enter. And let's press zoom 9. And there is my histogram of all of my residuals. So if you notice, if I hit trace, remember how I said my lowest were right around -5. So they're saying there were about 3 residuals in the -5s. And remember I said that the highest residual I went up to is about 7. There's the residual, the one residual that was about 7. Now, if I was going to have to copy this down on a free response question, all of these values would be super annoying. So I'm going to go over to window and I'm just going to even it out some. So I'm going to make it start at -5. And I'm never going to chop it off. I'm always going to extend it a little bit to make my life easier. So maybe I'll have this one go up to 15 since it's already at 10. And I'm going to have the scale, maybe we'll take a look at 5 and see if that gives us enough. And then I'm going to press graph. So now I've selected what those look like, and that doesn't look that great. So I'm going to try to go back and say, okay, let's do 10 of them, or 7 or 8, or whatever you would want to do, and press graph. Oh, that was not any better because I said the width was 10. So if I wanted a little bit more of them, I've got to lower that from 5. So let's go like every 2. And there we go. And now I can say it's not bad enough to not call normal, right? And again, if I hit trace, it's going to show me much easier numbers to translate onto paper to help me. So I thought that was pretty cool. While we're here, let's go ahead and show you how to run. Remember, this only works if you have raw data in list 1 and list 2. If I wanted to run linear regression, it is a test. I'm going to arrow up so it cycles down to the bottom of the graph. So let's go do an interval first. So we're going to tell it that the raw data is in list 1 and list 2. Let's do a 95% confidence interval for the slope. And it will run it and it will tell me there's my confidence interval for the slope. The slope for the best fit line was this, degrees of freedom, and so on, along with my A and my R, right? So everything's in here along with the format A plus BX, okay? If I wanted to run a significance test, same place, stat, then test. Then I'm going to go over towards test, linear regression t-test, and again, this will be on slope. And I'll say list 1 and list 2, and let's say I was looking for a positive relationship between these. And I would leave it at greater than, calculate. And again, it will tell me it's A plus BX. It will tell me my test statistic is a 12. That is far to the right. So my probability is going to be 0. So it is very strongly related that there is a relationship between X and Y as far as slope goes. Degree of freedom, probability, right? P-value, all that other stuff is right here as well. But notice whether you run a confidence interval or whether you run a significance test, if you have the raw data in both of those, it will give you your A plus BX as well as your R squared, and your S that you would have seen in a computer printout. All right, I hope that helps.